Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm sat across from a man who will never have a hurricane named after him simply because it would never die. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a force of nature in human form.
I love that, but also it would never be named after me because hurricanes are named after women.
No, they're not.
They're all female names.
Bro, Hurricane Ian is not a women's name.
I thought they're like Isabella, Katrina. I thought they were female names.
I just gave you Hurricane Ian. Do you know many women named Ian?
I don't know. You know, there's a lot of different ways people are naming right now, but I've never seen like, you know, Hurricane Henry.
Bro, I guarantee it's out there. They just go through the alphabet and they pick a name.
Okay.
Well, you just learned something, Garrett. I'll be here to teach you things all day. Now, so you may know that Garrett...
You can name a tornado after me.
That's allowed?
They don't name tornadoes, though.
They don't. It's probably because they're so short-lived. But anyways, this is not about tornadoes or hurricanes. Garrett, on top of being a guy who will never have a hurricane named after him, is also the owner of the second coolest ice bath on this podcast. Aren't you, Garrett?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, we recently both got brand new ice baths.
No, I'm pretty clear on that part.
And they were, not only were they brand new and like massively upgraded from what we DIY'd ourselves, they were also custom wrapped with Impossible Life graphics. It says "Today Matters" on the lid. They look amazing.
What you may have missed in context there is that Nick thinks his ice bath wrap is way cooler than mine.
Way better.
Regardless of that, our good friend Chris Hudson with Freedom Plunge did us a major solid, upgraded both of us.
Yes.
Both of our ice baths look really awesome. He wrapped them for us. Nick just has a different color scheme than mine and thinks that
Looks
he
way better.
Picked better colors.
I 100% did.
That remains to be seen. However,
Freedom Plunge is now the official sponsor of the Impossible Life, and for once we're not joking because I feel like we've feigned
the official
first sponsor of the Impossible Life, and it could not be better. Like, I think an ice bath sponsorship makes sense for us because we both do it every day anyways. And what's amazing is we actually met Chris at our very first ice bath event
how cool.
January of 2022, which is incredible.
Maybe there's other people listening to our podcast that we will have other future alignments with.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's one of the joys. And Chris has also become one of my best friends.
Right.
So real quick about Freedom Plunge. For listening to this, you can get in touch with Chris. He can ship to Canada, U.S., and Mexico. Most cold plunges out there are $5,000 and up. This is like half price that. And for being a listener of The Impossible Life, you get $100 off of it. Boom. So you can contact Chris at freedomplunge.com to get yours going. Did we mention that you can do a custom wrap yourself? Yes, you can. You can put anything you want on it, or you can choose from standard colors. These things look sweet, stay super cold, and make you better. And I'm going to go ahead and put our pictures of our ice baths on Instagram, G, so people can vote, because I think it'll be interesting to have some hard data to confirm that mine looks better.
It'd be great if you get to win something for once.
You mean like I won that hurricane story? Anyways, okay, so today is fear part...
We'll see how many people feel sorry for you.
When you're drowning me in my ice bath?
No, I mean how many sympathy votes you get.
Bro, I'm not going to... Okay. I'm not even going to bite on that, man. This is the problem. You become an expert at pushing buttons. All right, so today is part 2 of our 3-part series on fear, and we are going over steps 2 and 3 in the 4-part process to get rid of fear, which is to understand what your fear is costing you and to despise your fear.
So the first part is know your fear. If you haven't listened to that one yet, you know, a lot of our podcasts link together and we'll reference other podcasts, but we're in a series here. You can listen to this one, but I would recommend that you go back if you haven't listened to it already and listen to part 1, the previous episode, Know Your Fear.
Yeah, know your fear. So understanding what your fear is costing you. We're going to get into some of the characteristics of this, but I want to tell you a little story, G. In 1938,
I like stories.
I know you do. It's not about a hurricane. In 1938, a 12-year-old boy found a huge black rock that he brought home. And his dad said, hey, what a great doorstop. They used it as a doorstop in their home for 9 years. His dad was a miner, not a miner like a under 18 miner, but like in the mines. And so he realized one day that because he worked in mines that, you know, black rocks, he realized that sometimes sapphires can come in different colors. So he thought, hey, maybe I have something here. He did some research. He put it up for sale, didn't really get any interest. And then suddenly an Armenian-born jeweler named Harry Kazanjian, apologies if I'm murdering that name, came along and said, hey, I'll give you $18,000 for it. What do you think he did? He sold it instantly. $18,000.
Dude had no tact or wisdom.
No, he's a miner. I mean, dude, he's probably thinks it was his lucky day. So he sells
like,
it.
This idiot.
Yeah, 18 grand. We need the money. I'm a miner. Sweet. So for 2 months, the guy that bought it studied it and kept it.
I mean, that's more than what his house cost.
Yeah, exactly. So for 2 months, and this is 1938, so that was like big money.
Yeah, a house back then cost like $9,000.
Yeah, and I think this is in Australia as well. So then the guy takes it. The jeweler takes it, and he decides how to cut it. Figures out how to cut it. Cuts it into something called the Black Star of Queensland, which is now actually worth $80 million. The actual sapphire that he cut was worth $1 million. Paid $18,000 to somebody who was just like, oh, I better take it while I can, and sold it on for $1 million. That then became part of this Queensland, the Black Star of Queensland, which is this whole wrap with diamonds for $80 million.
Wow.
Why are we telling you that story, G? Because you don't think there's some scarcity mindset, some fear in that guy, in that miner selling it for 18 grand?
There's certainly a misunderstanding of the value.
Big time. And that is the point. Fear will cause you to misinterpret the value of things. And that's why are we telling you this? Because when you are looking at fear.
And I think what's interesting too is most people wouldn't see the fear in that.
No.
What was that guy afraid of?
Yeah. Well, he was probably afraid that he was going to miss out on that opportunity, or the guy would realize. And I think for him as well, we'll get into this later. I don't want to dive too much into that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I'm just highlighting that a lot of people would look at that story and they wouldn't see the fear piece in
Correct.
the story.
Yeah. Well, so what we're going to get into with fear, when you're looking at the cost of something and the cost of fear in particular, there is a known cost and there is an unknown cost. And
fear is expensive.
Fear is incredibly pricey, and you don't oftentimes know it. Where people will see this in everyday life that they can relate to. I have a house, Garrett. You have a house. We're sat in it right now. So what people will do when they say they buy a house, like, oh, I bought the house for X amount of dollars, and they know they have a monthly payment, and they can make the monthly payment, and their interest rate is whatever. But hey, as long as I can afford it monthly, I'm good. So how much did you pay for your house? Well, let's say you bought a $300,000 house, G, and you got a 5.35% interest rate on a 30-year fixed loan. What you actually pay for the house when all's said and done is $606,086. So you actually pay for your house twice. Now, we're not going to factor in appreciation, and you may make more money and all that sort of stuff. The point is that when you buy a house, you see the price, but no one sits down and goes, what am I actually going to pay for this? Well, I'm guessing some people do, but I would say very few people do that.
Some people think of as they're signing for the mortgage and they see it on their statement sheet.
Yeah, they're like, wait,
what the 30-year cost is.
And where do you see it even more is in credit cards. When that 18-year-old that signs up and gets the 27%.
There's a big difference between a 26% interest rate and a 3% interest rate.
Yeah, and what do all the money people say? If you're making minimums on your credit cards, you're not even paying the interest off, and so then you start paying compound interest, and you're literally paying interest on interest. So your debt is growing, not shrinking, and you're still paying every month. That is a great picture of fear. So like we said, it's known costs and unknown costs. And the unknown costs here, like if you're that 18-year-old getting a credit card, is all the interest that you're going to get absolutely slapped with that you have no idea about. The known cost is, okay, well, I bought something for $500. And just file that away, because we're going to go into the 3 different categories that we talked about where fear is the most common for people. But we want to make sure you understand how we're approaching this. One of the other things to really note whenever you're trying to understand the cost of fear is we said that fear looks forward. Last week, I think that was one of the biggest characteristics, is that fear is that story that you just keep running away with in your mind, and that you're
yeah. What's a story that you tell yourself of a negative future?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you're afraid of. You keep playing out this future that hasn't happened yet, of something negative that's going to happen to you, whether it's losing your job or another financial issue or a relationship going wrong or other fears related to, geopolitical things, all this stuff. There's a negative future that you think about, and that's where your fears are.
But here's the thing. In order to understand the cost, you have to look back. So when we were going through this, we were going through various scenarios and all the different common ways that people get robbed. And it wasn't until, for me personally, I had that aha moment of going, well, hang on. When I did this myself, first of all, I recognized fear, like we said last week. When you know your fear, then you start realizing all the different places it's been in your life, and you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, literally there's been someone in my house robbing me the entire time.
And I want to clarify something that you said, that to understand the cost of fear, you have to look back. You don't have to look back. You'll see the cost when you look back.
Right.
You'll see the known and the unknown cost when you look back. But we're also going to talk about what you need to identify, and you can't see it, but you need to project. You need to have an understanding that there's a cost that you don't know that you're paying, and that's cost that's in front of you, right? That's interest on your fear that we're trying to save everybody from.
Big time.
And just like if you're a Dave Ramsey fan, he will tell you, he'll make you think differently about the debt on your credit card. He'll make you think differently about the debts in your life.
Yes.
And he's going to get you to change your relationship with it. That's what we're going to do here. We want you to have a different understanding of what your fear is costing you, because it is more expensive than you think.
Big time. Man, I couldn't have said that any better myself, Garrett, so thank you for saying that.
I know.
You're feisty today. So last couple of things, and then I do want to get into the individual examples that we've got. But one thing to note, fear, we give these categories, and remember our 3 categories are life and death, resources, and meaning and purpose.
And that was just a summarization on the last episode of like all the fears will fit into these 3 categories.
If those scenarios that you play out forward will fall into one of those 3 categories. But what's important to note is it's not like fear just comes in and says, oh, hey, Garrett, I'm just going to rob you in resource, but I'll leave your life and death and I'll leave your meaning and purpose alone.
You don't get a bill in the mail of a statement.
It bleeds into every area of your life. And it is if it's robbing you in your mindset and you're aware of it, I promise you it's robbing you in your relationships, it's robbing you in your finances, it's robbing you in your health, it's robbing you literally everywhere.
It's like a sickness, right?
Yeah.
It starts just like, oh, it's just, a sinus infection. Well, now I have a headache. Well, now I can't make it to work. Now I'm out of energy to play with my children. Like, it adds up in the ways that it steals from you.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go into it. I want to give people examples straight away. We have a couple questions that we're going to give you guys to help identify areas of fear in your life. But I want to give an example from Garrett's life. Okay, so one of the questions is, what's a time that you took a risk and it worked for you? And what if you hadn't? Like, this is a great way to start to understand the cost, because for you, Garrett, like, you're a Navy SEAL, right? There's a huge amount of risk involved in that. And obviously your life is, you're very satisfied in your life. You got a lot of things that you could point to that are on top of all the experiences, the relationships, the things that you got to do serving your country, just who it made you to be. Like, you would have never, it's impossible to really think who you would be if like at 19 you'd gone, you know what, I probably can't. Other people are right.
I probably can't, or here's all the negative ways that this could go wrong. No one's really encouraging me to do this. Yeah, my life would look very differently if I hadn't taken that path.
But you would never know what it could have been, right? Like if someone could go back to the 19-year-old Garrett and, or if you could have like an alternative timeline of your life shown to you right now, you could never know those things at the time. You probably would have said, you know what, I don't want to go for the SEALs because I like whatever. I'm going to go into business with my dad. Things are still going to be good. But you would have had no idea what you're missing out on. Another way...
the way I looked at it, though, and what'll challenge you to overcome that is, with great risk, there's also greatness that you don't even know is there. Like, what I knew about this program was, as scary as it was, as challenging as it was, and as, whatever growth and greatness that would come from that I could quantify, I knew there was an unquantifiable level of growth and greatness that would also come from it. Yeah.
No, that's very well said. The reason we're asking that question is because everybody that's listening to this will have something in their life, sometime in their life, when they said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And it worked out. And you sit there and you think about that moment of becoming. Like, for you, it was after Hell Week, you went for your run and you sat on the rocks and you had a moment with yourself and you're like, I just did what I said I was going to do. The value of those moments is something that you can never really accurately understand until you experience it and you have it in your memory maker. You can go back and know that you were there. And that the reason we're saying that for each person to do that is because you need to understand all these moments that you know now could have not been, and that is the unknown cost of fear.
Yeah, it's an example of if you made those decisions, and it's an example of where you didn't let fear steal from you.
Yes.
I want to ask the other question.
Please
because this is a very intriguing question to me. And this is a question that you need to ask yourself, and this is this. Where would you be in your life if every time that somebody had told you that you can't do it, that you believed them? Right? Where would you be in your life? Every single person that's listening to this podcast, whether your life looks like you wanted it to look like, whether you've dreamed a dream since you were young and you're living in it, or you've made a lot of mistakes in your life, or you feel like you've been afraid to take the leap, or you've been afraid to take the risk in your life, regardless of where on the spectrum you are between those two places. Every single person listening to this podcast at one point in their life has done something, even though people said to them, you can't do that, right? Think about where you would be in your life if every single time somebody said to you, you can't do this, that you believe them. Now, after you take a second to think about that question, what I want you to understand is that that's fear.
Yes.
Right? Fear will tell you you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is so many times in our lives, even if it's not just a person that tells us like, hey, you can't do that, the fear in your mind will say, hey, you can't do that.
Yes.
Right? And you're going to either choose or not choose to listen to that fear.
Yeah. Man, I just think about that for my own life, and just that, like you said, you're going to shift your relationship. That is such a great reframe question, because when you start thinking about where your life would have gone if you had listened, it makes you mad, right? You think about the people who doubted you. The guy, your guy in Buds that told you every day, Uncle Bach, you got no chance. Like, I know that stirred up a fire.
I should have just, for as often as he said it, I should have just made a t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. You could have saved him a lot of time, just pointed at the shirt. But like, truthfully, think about that. Anyways. Okay. So first area, G, for life and death, that's the category. And like we said last week, this is, obviously it's your loved ones, it's for yourself, it's pain. And that's the one we want to look at. If you have a fear of pain, the known cost of having a fear of pain, and you can go back and watch my first ice bath if you want to see what somebody with fear of pain looks like.
And remember, this is in the context today of understanding what your fear is costing you. So
Correct.
We're going to talk about this first one and explain what it's actually costing you.
Right. So here's what you think it's costing you. Man, I have a poor relationship with pain. I'm afraid of it. I try and avoid it. And what this will look like is
This was Nick's first ice bath.
This is my first ice bath.
Shout out to Freedom Plunge.
Boom. But you make it that your relationship with pain is to make it go away as fast as possible. So you're stressed out.
Or just completely avoid it.
Exactly. So the cost of it is it's stress, because you're like, anytime pain comes around, it's stress. But then when you realize you're ducking out, it's shame.
Yes, one of the lessons that I experienced in the SEAL teams is the worst part of pain is the anticipation of the pain.
Yes.
But that doesn't have to be a truth.
Correct.
Right? You can learn that like, this is actually the worst part. Let me discard this, right? Because this is a default that's happening to me, this anticipation of the pain. And it'll actually be way less if I can just be in a different state until it's time to be in the pain. And then I'm going to be in the pain, and then I'm going to get back out of the pain.
Yeah.
It's like being in the ice bath for 15 minutes of pain, but really you were only in the water for 1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. So stress and shame are the known costs. And let me just say, if you have a relationship with pain where you are afraid of it, so your response to it is to make it go away as fast as possible, people will have costs associated with that for the things that they buy to make that go away, which is a lot of people, it's weed, it's alcohol, it's whatever subscriptions or addictions that they may have in their life are oftentimes just to numb pain.
Can I just say something to the people that are listening to our podcast that have that stuff in their life? If you've got alcohol in your life, if you've got drugs in your life, and you use these things to avoid pain, they're not helping you.
Correct.
You think they're helping you. You are pouring something on the wound that you think is going to ease it, and it's making the wound worse. You are infecting yourself, and you're weakening yourself. It's like taking opiate drugs, right, for pain. Like, you think you're numbing the pain, you're sickening yourself, you're weakening yourself. And what I would love to say to every single one of you is to stop it. Decide that you're going to put these things behind you, because you're medicating and you're choosing, I don't want to be uncomfortable. If you'll decide to get uncomfortable, if you'll decide like, I'm going to deal with this pain in my life, and I'm not talking about like, you're taking drugs because you have back pain, and you still shouldn't take those type of drugs for back pain. But like I'm not talking about physical pain in your life. I'm talking about you have pain from your relationships. You have pain from your relationship with money. You have pain from stress that you have in your life, stress that you've imagined in your life. Dealing with those types of pain and using drugs and alcohol to do them, you're making all of those pains worse in your life. You're not making them better. And it's because you're making yourself weaker. Because you get weaker in your life, you're allowing those pains to grow. So just decide that you're not going to walk that path anymore. Yeah.
And when Garrett says all that, I was one of those guys. When I was in California, 100%, I would smoke weed to help relieve my stress, because, man, I felt better. But you know what? When you woke up the next day, it was still there, right? And that's the unknown cost that you just talked about, some of those things.
And you're just thinking about, well, I'll feel better. I won't have to deal with this pain when I go to that place.
Yeah, or in your mind, you're like, well, I'll just keep doing this. Because
this is the opposite also of the thought process that I've talked about before, where strength isn't what you can pick up for a moment,
right?
But it's what you don't have to put down.
Yeah.
You're telling yourself, man, I can't hold on to that. I can maintain it for a few moments, and then I have to go back to my comfortable place.
Yes.
Right. Decide with whatever the pain is in your life that you're going to grow from it, right? I'm going to let these tests in my life produce endurance in me, and that's going to help me grow and become who I'm supposed to be. And I'll be able to not only pick up this weight and maintain it, but I can maintain more weight in the future.
And that's part of the unknown cost. Like if you're in that position that we talked about and you have a fear of pain, we talked about stress, it's shame, it's the cost of whatever you're doing to whatever you're using to self-medicate. But Garrett touched on some of the unknown costs, which was one, you're actually putting yourself in a weak position, which guess what happens when you're weak? More pain. You are literally committing yourself to taking more laps around the mountain because you're never solving the problem.
It's the unknown cost. You're not thinking about it like from this fear of pain, but because of your fear of pain, you're actually signing yourself up for more pain.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you're also robbing yourself of your potential.
Think about just, using the example of you with the ice bath.
Yeah.
Right? You overcame your fear of just spinning. And, it's so funny. I've posted a few of them on Instagram. It's so funny, all these videos. The people making fun of the ice bath stuff now. I get a kick out of all of them. But anyways, back to you. It just popped into my head, some of those videos I've been watching lately. But anyways, back to, your fear of pain with the ice bath. If you hadn't chose to get over that pain, like so much in your life came after that moment. Not that cold water did something specific for you, but it's what you did with the cold water. When you changed your relationship with this, when you realize like, man, this is really uncomfortable for me, but I can choose it, it allowed you to do the same thing in so many other areas of your life. And look at how you've grown and changed since then.
No, that's exactly right. That avoidance of pain, what I didn't realize was I had pain avoidance, not just in that where I would take shortcuts for things. I had pain avoidance in every area of my life. Like I said, emotionally, like difficult memories, things that I really needed to unpack. You were actually the first person, because I was depressed for 6 years, that said, hey, why did you get depressed? I remember when you asked me, I was like, and I had never thought about it. Why? Because I had pain avoidance. So I had never gone back and unpacked the lesson from that. So what happened whenever I was actually able to sit with my pain and I had learned that lesson? My potential grew because suddenly I now understood my story. I understood why it happened. And I got to pull all the lessons and the growth out of it and strengthen myself so I wouldn't go back there. But you're right. If I would have kept avoiding it, what's the potential there? Well, more pain, right? But hey, I'm just avoiding it because that's the cost of it. Is I don't want to pay the price of pain. So I'm just going to keep paying more pain because you don't know. And that's the unknown cost of it. And I didn't even realize it was robbing me. But then when you go in and you have these huge victories of realizing this is why it happened, this is what was going on, this is what I've changed, this is the root of it, man, you come out of there with so much confidence and your shoulders truly broaden and you walk into different situations being like, hey, whatever happens, I'm going to be good here. And it's so that's what I mean. I would have never known any of that. But it all started with just sitting in an ice bath. And it unveiled so much of my life.
Making a choice to stop being afraid of the pain. It really is the Bruce Lee quote, don't ask for an easy life, ask for the strength to endure a difficult one. Right? People who pray for an easy life, they're believing, and this is false, they're believing that there's a life that doesn't have pain.
Yeah.
Right? Not in this world.
Yeah.
Right? There is pain for you wherever you go. And I love Pastor Keith's poem of Choose Your Heart.
Yeah. So
right.
good.
And that's really what that's about. If you want to be in shape, that's going to hurt. If you want to be overweight, that's going to hurt. If you want to be poor, that's going to hurt. If you want to be financially well off, if you want to create wealth in your life, that's going to be painful. There's going to be pain wherever you go in your life. But the unknown cost of your pain is if you try to hide from it, not only are you signing yourself up for more pain, but you're robbing yourself of your potential. So we'll move on from pain, but let's just, what pain was, it's one of the categories, right? It's one example in the category of life and death. There's so many other things in your life around your health, your relationship with death, your relationship with your own personal growth, that those fears can keep you from. What we want you to understand is not just the known costs of those, but there's great unknown costs as well. So now we're going to go on to the next category. Yeah.
Next category is resource. And what we want to focus on as one of the big ones is finance, right? So what's the known cost of if you suffer from fear of finance? Well, what I've learned personally, because I feel like we're going through my history here as we knock all these out, is you cannot enjoy the money that you do have. If you think that you're going to get to a certain level where, I made enough money and now I don't have that fear anymore, I don't have to worry, I promise you, if you don't solve your thinking on it, you will always feel that way, because the target, it's like saying the target is your hand and you have your hand out in front of your face. So every time you step forward, your hand moves forward with you. So your mindset can be just as stressed out when you're making, I don't know, $250,000 as it can be when you're $30,000, because you've not reassociated the way that you view those things, and you've not changed the rules from. So that's the known cost. The unknown cost, G, because like we said, it's not going to just cost you where you think it is that you don't understand you're establishing a fixed mindset whenever you do that. The thought looks like this whenever you're a person who has fear in finance, and I know this very well. I would always play out scenarios where I would ask myself the question, well, what would I do if it all went away? Like if I lost all my income like tomorrow, how would I still be able to do this? Okay, well, I'll just get this little car because a $250 payment, I think I could do that. Like if in the worst case scenario, I've only got $1,500 that I'd have to go for a month, and I could get a job at like Burger King or whatever. And like if I worked enough, that was literally how my mind would work back on things. So I was always scared to take on anything new
because you have that fear around money.
Yeah,
right. That fear makes you smaller in relationship to money. Versus you could have a different, and this is related to the unknown cost, right? Because you think your known, like, well, okay, the cost of this fear, right, is I'm giving up, like what I'm choosing is security.
Correct.
Right? I'm giving up this thing, but I think this will make my life easier, and I won't have to, I'll choose this worry over that worry. But when you allow those worries, when you allow those fears, like in that context where you're choosing to like, okay, well, I'll just take this small car payment because I think this is what, won't overburden me, right? And that doesn't mean make financially wise and financially sound decisions. But when you do things out of a fear mindset, when you're choosing a car payment based upon like, well, if I lost everything, here's what I think I could still do, right? When you do that, what you're also doing is making yourself smaller because of that fear, and you're creating a limited mindset.
Big time.
Right? You're not realizing, okay, instead of that, what am I actually capable of? Right? We talked about how some people, their relationship with money is they think, what your thought was at that one point in your life where it's like, okay, well, if I lost everything, lost all my money, lost my job, I could figure out how to scrounge up, a $250 payment.
Yeah.
There's also people who have a very different relationship with money, and they don't really make those decisions out of a fear mindset, but they say like, $30,000 mortgage. I could, if this business crashed, I know I could start up another business and I could create a product, and I could pull all the right things together to make this and rebuild myself in that amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's that say? It's their beliefs in themselves. And that I did not realize I was reinforcing that negative belief about myself that, hey, it was a very limiting belief. And that all started from a fear of finance. How many opportunities did I miss out on, G? When I look back and I think about times when people, because I was so scared of doing anything with my money, times whenever it's like, oh, we could invest in this. People like, hey, stock market opportunities, whatever opportunity came along, things that are obvious that I missed out on. But how many other things was I not even aware of because I was already writing them off as like, oh, I'd never have that much money, right? Like I could never even think about doing that. I think about some of the things that I'm able to do now. And
it's a major
ridiculous
scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
You don't think that you're capable of anything, so you're also never willing to risk anything.
Correct.
And if you want to grow personally, if you want to grow financially, you're going to have to take risks.
Yeah. And I can tell you, when you're in that mindset, when you're in a scarcity mindset, all you see is threats. Literally, you can tell everybody the reasons that things won't work out. When you are in an abundance mindset, all you see is opportunity. And you're just like, man, I can't believe how many different ways there are to make money. It's crazy.
Don't think that you're immune to any of these fears.
Yeah.
I've had this conversation with some of my friends, even as they transitioned out of the SEAL teams, where this is shocking to me. This would be probably shocking to some of you listening, and I'm not dogging on them because then I have this conversation with these guys, and they're like, "Well, wait a second, that's not me. That's not how I'm supposed to think." But I have friends who have been transitioning out of the SEAL teams, and these guys have an incredible career, very capable, right? But then they start thinking about, okay, here's what I'm going to do in the civilian world, and they're thinking about taking a job that barely pays as much or even pays less than what they made in the military as a SEAL, which is not even great to begin with. But they're so focused on security.
Right.
And I'll say to my friends, like, okay, so hold on a second. So you're telling me, right, for the last 10 years, for the last 15 years, for the last 20 years, you've done a job that you were willing to risk your life for, right? But now we're going to transition out into the business world, and what you're so afraid of is that you don't have any income for 3 months, that you don't have any income for 5 months. Like that would be the worst thing in the world to you, that, your bank account would go down, that you would empty your savings, right? And the conversation I'm having with these guys is they're realizing like, well, hold on a second. Like, yeah, I have a fear mindset about this. They don't look at themselves as capable financially. They don't look at themselves as capable in the business world as they are in the battlefield, where it's like, whatever happens, I know I'm going to be able to solve this situation.
Yeah.
Right. And so no one is immune to having these types of fears. And I'll have these conversations with some of my friends, either over Zoom or we get together for coffee, and they realize what this fear, they thought they were being rational. And they're like, wait a second, like I've been having the wrong mindset around transitioning into the business world. I'm just as capable there as I am on the battlefield. There's battlefield skill sets, but there's also battlefield mindset, right? And they got to take their battlefield mindset into the workplace and just realize they can learn new skills, just like they learn skills in the military.
I'm glad you gave that. That's a great example. Hopefully it gives people permission to realize, look, you can be experiencing these fears. Last one that we talked about was in the category of meaning and purpose. And this is a very common one. Once again, I feel like all these are ones I can speak from personal experience on. Fear of failure.
You've grown, Nick.
Thank you, G. I appreciate that. Fear of failure is what the known cost, like we talked about with 19-year-old Garrett. Well, I'm just not going to become a Navy SEAL. Like, that's the destiny you can see. But how many relationships, how many things have you gained that you would have never been able to account for, G, that are still serving you now? Relationships that, I know Joe Musselman was on here. You would have never met Joe Musselman, who you guys have a very great business together, not to mention the friendship that you get to enjoy, all the people you get to know, the experiences that you've got to have, the skill sets that you've gained. That's all the stuff that you could have never known. And there's a destiny that you can't see, that you can't imagine. For the listeners, like the question we asked you, what if you're married or if you're not, what if you never had asked that girl out, right? What if you would never asked your wife out? What would you have been missing out on? Can you imagine what your life would be like? I can't imagine if I wasn't with my wife, if I didn't have my kids. But truthfully, if I would have let fear dictate to me, I wouldn't have done it. And that's the destiny that you can't see. So if that's true in one area, like if I know I can grasp that for if I hadn't asked my wife out, look what I would have been missing out on. What are you missing out on that you don't even know of? And I start to think about that. I'm like, man, like, who knows?
Yeah. So the fear here is, it's a fear of failure.
Yeah.
Right. You're thinking about what I could be capable of in my life, right? I was having that thought process when I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Here's what I think I could be capable. And the fear was also there of like, well, man, what if I fail on this great thing that I want to go do? Right. And if you succumb to that fear of failure, and that doesn't mean that you might not fail, that you might not make mistakes. Just by choosing to deny fear and to overcome fear doesn't mean that you're going to accomplish something.
Yeah.
But you've got to realize that just by having those fears, you're going to miss out on life. And by having I love the Wayne Gretzky quote, you miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
Right. And I would have 100% never become a SEAL if I had been afraid to even try, if I had been afraid to start. And so what Nick is saying is there's a known cost of like, if I had engaged that fear, I won't become a SEAL. Right. And there's some good things that come along with that. But there's so much in my life that is a part of that became from that I had no ability to quantify at the time that I made that decision.
Exactly.
Right. So there is a known cost of giving up on your destiny, but there's also an unknown cost of quitting on your destiny. There's a destiny that you can't see, and there's so many things that come out of that. And really, for me, the destiny that I can't see, that I think of, that gives me great courage, is I think about all the people that I get the opportunity to work with and influence, not just my own children, but people that I work with and their children, right? What if I'm giving somebody a thought that becomes a major part of their legacy?
Yeah.
Right. And that gives me so much courage for what I have to do every single day to become who I've been called to be, because I realize there is so much unknown destiny that I'll never know about, but I don't want to miss out on.
Yeah. So we're going to get into what it means to despise your fears. I'll talk from my own personal experience. When I began to sit there and think about times whenever, like I said, the financial fears were big for me. And I sat there and thought, hey, you were actually fine. And even whenever you were making more than what you needed and you should have been enjoying it, you weren't, because you were afraid. So it ruined all the times that you could have had. And then I started realizing all the unknown costs. Man, it got me, truthfully, it angered me. I'll put it that way to be polite about it. Like in a way that I cannot even understand. And I started looking and seeing how fear was literally robbing me. You said, G, you just
I want to give an example.
Yeah, please
of this,
do.
Right. So we talked about understanding what fear is costing you and then despising your fear. And when we were planning this, I asked Nick, I said, let me explain how this works to you, what it really means to despise something. I asked Nick, I said, has anybody ever stolen anything from you? And he said, yeah. I said, okay, what was stolen from you? And you said that somebody broke into your car, right, and stole some CDs. It was like the first thing that popped into your mind. You probably had some other things stolen from you in your life, but that was the story that you gave me.
Correct.
And so I said, did you at any point, right, and so they stole the CDs, and I said, did you, after it was stolen from you, did you start imagining and thinking about them breaking into your car and stealing from you? And he confirmed that to me. Like if something has been stolen from you, you start thinking about like, well, that person was in my house, right? That person was in my car, and they came through the door, they came through the window, and they were in my stuff, and they were like, and then you start realizing like, what else have they taken?
You feel violated.
You feel extremely violated, right? And you get more mad.
Yes.
Right. Before Nick had walked back to his car and seen the broken window, he wasn't mad, right? No. He had no knowledge that something had been stolen from him.
Correct.
Right. And then he understood the cost. He understood what had been stolen from him, what had been taken from him. And he got mad. And then he started to think on it more and realized like, man, this person has been like in my space and I didn't know they were here. And like you said, you feel violated, right? And so you start to see this picture in your mind. You start to tell this story of what's happened to you. And I'm not like encouraging that you should feel this way about someone who's like stolen CDs from you. But in that moment, you start to feel these very strong feelings about someone who's taken something from you and you're very bothered by it. This is what's supposed to happen with your fear.
Yes.
Right. You have to see fear as that person who broke into your car and stole CDs from you. Right. Once you start to realize, okay, this person took things from me I had no knowledge of. And now I realize that they've been in my space. Mm-hmm. They've been inside my home. They've been inside my car, or for fear, they've been inside my soul. They've been inside my mind, and it's been taking things from me. And I don't know how long it's been here. It'll change how you feel about fear. Right. So what it means to despise something is really to recharacterize. Yeah. And I'm not like, I don't want you to like despise people. Right. Like, and that's also not Christ-like to think about someone, breaking into your home and like you despise this person, want to just hunt them down and kill them. Right. That's not what I'm encouraging, but I am using that, which is a very natural feeling that people have, as an analogy for what should happen with your fear. You need to begin to despise your fear. Once you realize what it's taken from you, mm-hmm. and that it's been inside your home, it's been inside your car, it's been inside your mind, you're going to start to think about your fear very differently. And so what'll happen because of that is because you despise your fear, the next time fear knocks at your door, the next time you realize that fear is on your street, you're not going to let it into your home.
Exactly. Yeah. And remember what we said. So you'll start to recognize this because you'll say, oh, I'm starting to play out a scenario here. Oh, it's my unbelief. Oh, it's my pain. Oh, it's the lack of opportunity. Oh,
That's
there's a
fear
scarcity
knocking at your door.
And then you start to realize it, man, exactly like Garrett said. When you realize it's making you the smallest, weakest version of yourself and keeping you from everything that God has for you, you will spit it out. You will recharacterize it as the person who's broken into your car or your home or doing whatever disgusting, horrible thing that you would that would bring that anger, and you will want no part of it.
And this is, if you know Nick personally, this is what you've seen happen in his life over the last year and a half.
True.
Is that Nick realized what his fear was costing him, and he's despised it.
Yeah, massively. I truthfully have to have a gag reflex to it, to where if I recognize it, I throw it out the whole time, because I've given the example before. My German Shepherd, she's 2 years old. She's a beast, man. She'll rip your face off. But when I yell at her, she goes down and she turns into the size of like a little tiny lap dog because she doesn't realize who she is. And it's exactly what we said. Fear will make you misinterpret your value. So if you're happy being less than what God made you to be, if you don't want all that God has for you, if you don't want to fulfill your potential, if you don't want to live a life that's unleashed and truly to experience life on a level you've never imagined, keep listening to your fear. But if you're ready to truly level up, man, you got to start throwing that stuff out. So we're going to wrap there, guys. And we got one more part next week. The challenge for you this week, very obvious.
Give them a sneak peek. What's the final piece?
Final one is take massive action. This is going to be fun next week because we're going to go into some action steps for how you overcome fear. And fortunately, Garrett's an expert at that, at putting people to face their fears. So it'll be fun. But the two questions that we gave, this is the challenge for you. Take these questions. Guys, if you don't do the work, this is just a really fun podcast to listen to. If you do the work, this is potentially life-changing. I'm saying that because I go back and listen to these, and I've done a lot of the work. So I'm encouraging you to do the same thing. I'm the first listener here. So number one, where would you be in your life if you believed people every time they said you couldn't do something? Ask yourself that question and start to realize that is fear in your life. Number two, What is a time that you took a risk and it worked, right? Start going through some of those things and then ask yourself the question, what if you hadn't? What that's going to do is that's going to start highlighting what the effects of fear are, because the fear is the counterpoint to that. It's if you hadn't, that's what it is. And start recognizing you are being robbed in ways that you don't know and get mad. Anything else, G?
You nailed it.
Boom.